Namaste, Dandavat Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master, Om Vishnu Pad, Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Mahārāja, we're here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order, chapter 23, text 26. Saishanunam Vrajatyur Vrajatyurdvam Anuvainyam Patim Sati Pasyatasman Atityarchir Dhruvi Bhavyena Karmana. The wives of the demigods continued, just see how this chaste lady, Archie, by dint of her inconceivable pious activities, is still following her husband upward, as far as we can see. Purport. Both Pṛthu Maharaja's airplane and the airplane carrying Queen Archie were passing out of the vision of the ladies of the higher planetary systems. These ladies were simply astonished to see how Pṛthu Maharaj and his wife achieved such an exalted position. Although they were the wives of the denizens of the higher planetary system, and Pṛthu Maharaj was an inhabitant of an inferior planetary system, the Earth, the king, along with his wife, passed beyond the realms of the demigods and went upward toward Vaikuntha Loka. The word Urdvam, upward, is significant here, for the ladies speaking were from the higher planetary systems, which include the moon, sun, and Venus, up to Brahma Loka, or the highest planet. Beyond Brahma Loka is the spiritual sky, and in that spiritual sky there are innumerable Vaikuntha Lokas. Thus the word Urdvam indicates that the Vaikuntha planets are beyond or above these material planets, and it was to these Vaikuntha planets that Maharaj Pṛthu and his wife were going. This also indicates that when Pṛthu Maharaj and his wife, Archie, abandoned their material bodies in the material fire, they immediately developed their spiritual bodies and entered into the spiritual airplanes, which could penetrate the material elements and reach the spiritual sky. Since they were carried by two separate airplanes, it may be concluded that even after being burned in the funeral pyre, they remained separate individual persons. In other words, they never lost their identity or became void, as imagined by the impersonalists. The ladies in the higher planetary systems were capable of seeing both downward and upward. When they looked down, they could see the body of Pṛthu Maharaj was being burned and that his wife Archie was entering into the fire. And when they looked upward, they could see how they were being carried in two airplanes to the Vaikuntha Lokas. All of this is possible simply by Dhruvi Bhavyena Karmana, inconceivable activity. Pṛthu Maharaj was a pure devotee, and his wife, Queen Archie, simply followed her husband. Thus they can both be considered pure devotees. And thus they are capable of performing inconceivable activities. Such activities are not possible for ordinary men. Indeed, ordinary men cannot even take to the devotional service of the Lord. Nor can ordinary women maintain such vows of chastity and follow their husbands in all respects. A woman does not need to attain higher qualifications, but if she simply follows in the footsteps of her husband, who must be a devotee, then both husband and wife attain liberation and are promoted to the Vaikuntha Lokas. This is evidenced by the inconceivable activities of Maharaj Pṛthu and his wife. Text 27. Te samdurapam kim tvanyam martyanam bhagavat padam bhuvilo layuso yevai naishkarmyam sadhayantyuta. In this material world, every human being has a short span of life, but those who are engaged in devotional service go back home, back to Godhead. for they are actually on the path of liberation. For such persons, there is nothing which is not available. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 9.33, Lord Krishna says, Anityam asukam lokam imam prapya bhajasvamam. The Lord here declares that this material world is full of miseries, asukam, and that at the same time is very flickering, anityam. Therefore, one's only duty is to engage himself in devotional service. This is the best end to which human life can be put. Those devotees who are constantly engaged in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord achieve not only all material benefits, but also all spiritual benefits. For at the end of life, they go back home, back to Godhead. Their destination is described in this verse as Bhagavat Padam. The word Padam means abode, and Bhagavat means the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, the destination of the devotees is the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this verse, the word Naishkarmyam, which means transcendental knowledge, is also significant. Unless one comes to the platform of transcendental knowledge and offers devotional service to the Lord, one is not perfect. Generally, the process of Jnana Yoga and Karma are executed life after life before one gets a chance to render pure devotional service to the Lord. This chance is given by the grace of a pure devotee, and it is in this way only that one can actually attain liberation. In the context of this narration, the wives of the demigods repented because although they had the opportunity of a birth in higher planetary system, a lifetime spanning millions of years and all material comforts, they were not as fortunate as Pṛthu Maharaj and his wife, who were actually surpassing them. In other words, Pṛthu Maharaj and his wife scorned promotion to the higher planetary systems and even to Brahma Loka because the position which they were attaining was incomparable. In Bhagavad Gita 8.16, the Lord affirms, Abrahma bhuvana loka punar avartinorjuna. From the highest planet in the material world to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. In other words, even if one goes to the highest planet, Brahmaloka, he has to return to the miseries of birth and death. In the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 9.21, Lord Krishna also asserts, Te tam bhuktva svarga lokam vishalam, shine punye martya lokam vishanti. When they have thus enjoyed heavenly sense pleasure, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus, after exhausting the results of pious activities, one has to come again to the lower planetary systems and begin a new chapter of pious activities. It is therefore said in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.12, Naishkarmyam apyuchata, Naishkarmyam api achyuta bhava varjitam. The path of liberation is not at all secure unless one attains the devotional service of the Lord. Even if one is promoted to the impersonal Brahmajyoti, he runs every chance of falling down into this material world. If it is possible to fall down from the Brahmajyoti, which is beyond the higher planetary systems in this material world, then what can be said of the ordinary yogis and karmis who can only be elevated to the higher material planets? Thus, the wives of the denizens of the higher planetary systems did not very much appreciate the results of karma, gyan, and yoga. Text 28. Savanchito patatmadruk krichena mahata bhuvi labdva pavargya manusyam vishayeshu vishajate. Any person who engages himself within this material world in performing activities that necessitate great struggle, and who, after obtaining a human form of life, which is a chance to attain liberation from miseries, undertakes the difficult tasks of fruitive activities, must be considered to be cheated and envious of his own self. Purport. In this material world, people are engaged in different activities simply to achieve a little success in sense gratification. The karmis are engaged in performing very difficult activities, and thus they open gigantic factories, build huge cities, make big scientific discoveries, etc. In other words, they are engaged in performing very costly sacrifices in order to be promoted to the higher planetary systems. Similarly, yogis are engaged in achieving a similar goal by accepting the tedious practices of mystic yoga. Jnanis are engaged in philosophical speculation in order to gain release from the clutches of material nature. In these ways, everyone is engaged in performing very difficult tasks simply for the gratification of the senses. All of these are considered to be engaged in sense gratificatory activities, or vishaya, because they all demand some facility for material existence. Actually, the results of such activities are temporary. As Krishna himself proclaims in Bhagavad Gita 7.23, Antavatu phalam tesham. The fruits of those who worship the demigods are limited and temporary. Thus, the fruits of the activities of the karmis, yogis, and jnanis are ephemeral. Moreover, Krishna says, Tad bhavatyalfa medhasam. They are simply meant for men of small intelligence. The word vishaya denotes sense gratification. The karmis flatly state that they want sense gratification. The yogis also want sense gratification, but they want it to a higher degree. It is their desire to show some miraculous results through the practice of yoga. Thus they strive very hard to achieve success in becoming smaller than the smallest, or greater than the greatest, or in creating a planet like Earth, or as scientists, by inventing so many wonderful machines. Similarly, the jnanis are also engaged in sense gratification, for they are simply interested in becoming one with the Supreme. Thus, the aim of all these activities is sense gratification to a higher or lower degree. The bhaktas, however, are not interested in sense gratificatory practices. They are simply satisfied to get an opportunity to serve the Lord. Although they are satisfied in any condition, there is nothing they cannot obtain because they are purely engaged in service of the Lord. The wives of the demigods condemn the performers of sense gratificatory activities as vanchita, cheated. Those so engaged are actually killing themselves, atmaha, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 11.20.17. Nirdeham adhyam sulabham sudurlabham plavam shukalpam guru karnadharam mayanu kulhena nabashavartritam puman bhavadim nataret saatmaha. When one wants to cross a large ocean, he requires a strong boat. It is said that this human form of life is a good boat by which one can cross the ocean of nescience. In the human form of life, one can obtain the guidance of a good navigator, the spiritual master. One also gets a favorable wind by the mercy of Krishna, and that wind is the instructions of Krishna. The human body is the boat, the instructions of Lord Krishna are the favorable winds, and the spiritual master is the navigator. The spiritual master knows well how to adjust the sails to catch the winds favorably and steer the boat to its destination. If, however, one does not take advantage of this opportunity, one wastes the human form of life. Wasting time in life in this way is the same as committing suicide. The word labdva pavargyam is significant in this verse because according to Jiva Goswami, apavargyam, or the path of liberation, does not refer to merging into the impersonal Brahman, but to salokyadi siddhi, which means attaining the very planet where the Supreme Personality of Godhead resides. There are 5 kinds of liberation, and one is called sayuja mukti, or merging into the existence of the Supreme, or the impersonal Brahman effulgence. However, since there is a chance of one's falling down again into the material sky from the Brahman effulgence, Srila Jiva Goswami advises that in this human form of life, One's only aim should be to go back home, back to Godhead. The words savanchita indicate that once a person has obtained the human form of life, he is actually cheated if he does not make preparations to go back home, back to Godhead. The position of all non-devotees who are not interested in going back to Godhead is very much lamentable, for the human form of life is meant for executing devotional service and nothing else. And thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue from text 29 on Monday. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srila Gurudev, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Gurudev, Srila Acharya Dev, Srila Shanta Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srila Sri Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Nrsimhapuri Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju Ki Jai. Ganga Mai, Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Giri Govardhan, Gupta Govardhan Dham Ki Jai, Shyam Kund Radha Kund Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Vrinda Devi Ki Jai, Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Scientific Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Sama Bhaktiveda Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi Hari 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 Bo. Jai Shrimati Uma Devi Dasi Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
श्रीपाद कृष्ण केशव प्रभु जी की जय। दंडवत प्रणाम प्रभु जी।
Dhanavad Stire.